Hello, good afternoon. How are you doing? Thank you for joining us today. Let me share my screen. So we're talking about personalization today. Start my video here. So I call it a holistic personalization because we're not going to just talk about some reactive personalization. Something happens on a website, you just react to it. Yes, that's part of it, but that's not the end of it. So how do we become good at end-to-end personalization every chance we have an engagement with the customer or the target? So how do we do that? So let's talk about what personalization means to you first. This is a buzzword. Yeah, you have to do it. And why do we have to do it? Because in this customer-centric world, and with all this one-to-one channel going around everywhere, I heard that average human being look at like 6 or 7 different screens a day, and their attention span is getting shorter and shorter. And they're in control. We think that we're in control, but we're not. The sooner we realize that, I think the market will be better off, actually. Now, what does that mean? That means they can sever the relationship anytime they want. And when do they do that? When they will give you information of themselves, their purchase, their demographic, their opinions about things or whatever. They'll give it to you until they think that this whole conversation is really boring and it's not beneficial for them. Then they'll cut off the whole thing. So we are obligated now, and for our own survival, to be relevant to these customers. So personalization means, okay, we want to show them what they think that is interesting to them. It's not about what we're trying to push. And also, it's got to be a gentle nudge. I mean, these guys, all these targets are bombarded with countless marketing messages every single day through every conceivable channel. So, yeah, they're bored and bothered and annoyed all at the same time. So, the gentle nudge is the key. So, how do we do that? We're going to talk about that too. So, let's do some checkpoint here. What do you think the personalization is? Some people say that, well, I call him Dear Steven, so that's personalization. It's not wrong, but that's not nearly enough. What if they say Dear Steven and send me like 2 emails per day, every week, every day, and with the same message, it's not personalized. Same boilerplate emails to me all the time. That is not personalization. Maybe what we're doing is personally annoying customers in the name of personalization. So how do we go above that is the thing. Another thing. Yeah, sure. Sometimes we know something about that person and we act like we know everything about that person, and that's really annoying. And another thing is that yeah, the good data is really hard to come by. So when you get something, you're gonna really bombard messages towards that target, to poor target. We'll get like 10 different messages at the same time. Maybe even if you buy something, I bought a mouse from some reputable site the other day, and they keep showing me the same mice every single day through email. I'm thinking, how many mice do you think I need here? So what happens now is that they know something about you. They think that's really valid. So they keep saying the same thing again and again. So what happens is that you're bothering the people who know something about, but ignore all the other people who don't know anything about anything really. What if that person didn't even click anything or bought anything? Then what are you going to do about it? Or maybe they didn't let you know what they're about. So the word personalization should be bigger than what we think it is now, and certainly not something that you just buy some personalization engine from somewhere. It could be a reputable company, and just turn that on autopilot and hope to God that that's enough. And I can tell you right now, it's not. And how do we know it? Well, we are on a receiving end of such messages, and how many times are you really impressed by any of the things that you get? Is my first question. So personalization is about the person, and you may think that that's an obvious statement, but it is not. Mostly, marketing messages are about product or the channel or the brand, the company, or sometimes a little division within that company. It's really rarely about that person. And why is that important? Because everybody's interested in themselves first. If you take a group photo of some people and distribute that picture to everybody, you know what they're going to do first? They're going to look for their own picture first. Oh, how do I look in this picture? That's human instinct. So when you talk about personalization, you have to be talking about what they're interested in, about them, their interests, their something that they aspire to be, whatever it is. It's about them. It's not about channel. I mean, we think that, oh yeah, we install these things on online, offline. Oh, great. But the person who just visited your site versus your store, or however they engage with you, that person did not change. We used to think that, oh wow, we have a new thing called internet. I'm going back 20 years here. And then we thought that, all the demand will go up, we'll do all these things on the internet. Guess what? A person who's looking for, say, golf club, will he buy two golf clubs just because there's a new channel? Never happens. Is it about that person? That person's demand and what they need, it doesn't change. So the things that we have to think about is that, do we know, how much do we know about that person? And we talk about customer 360 degree all the time now. And all this like customer data platform like CDP or the data lake, I mean, we have abundance of data. And compared to even just a few years ago, it is so much easier to do all these things. There are a lot of tool sets that can enable a 360 degree customer view and all. The question is that, are you using them? Are you addressing everybody that you engage in a different way? Are you harnessing all kinds of data, not just some data that you have? That's the question. So what is the fallacy of just relying on known explicit data? Let's say that you're running a cable company and you know that somebody's a football fan, and you know that that person lives in certain areas, so you can even figure out what kind of a football team that person will cheer for. Great. So when the person comes back to your website next time, sure, you can change the picture so that you can share some enthusiasm about that team. Yeah, but are you going to do that until when? You're going to just show the football team picture every single time he joins? What about 99% of the people that you don't know anything about? Are you going to just show the generic picture? So the whole explicit known data are really good to use, and I call it a reactive personalization. Yes, of course, you know something about that person. You have to pamper that person knowing that. Or if somebody let you know that, I'm looking for this item, then you know what? There's no need for analytics or the data mining or anything like that. Just react to that. But what I'm saying is that that kind of a data is really hard to come by. And even if you're doing 100% dealing with that kind of a data, it's not the end of it, because you may be just concentrating on like only a few percent of the customer base and ignore all the rest, and all the rest of the people are looking at the same messages. So we gotta go beyond what's known. And so how do we do that? Is that, well, there are all kinds of data out there. And it could be the web data, it could be the demographic data, it could be geodemographic data if you really don't know anything about anything. It's not just the last clicks. It's not just the last purchase either. And why are we bothered by, and going back to my mouse example, am I just that guy who bought the mouse and that's it? No, nobody's like one dimensional like that all over the place. Basically, you have to go deeper into all kinds of data that you have and make the most of them. Now, before we get into the data, of course, you have to deal with the data first. But let's talk about the framework of the personalization as well. Because a lot of personalization discussion is about the inbound. Somebody shows up somewhere and you will do something based on where he came from or what she's looking at, that type of thing. Those immediate data. And then you respond to it. Now, why is that important? It's because such a reactive personalization, I'm talking about the bottom part of this chart here, is important because, well, you may not have the total identity of that person. So the only thing that you have is what she or he did in past 5 minutes or where he came from and all. Now that is most of the personalization engine setup dialects. It's all based on where they came from, what he clicked, how long did he view these things, and all. Now, of course, if you can retrieve what he did in the past session, and by the way, the cookies are disappearing fast, so I'm not sure how long you can do these things. But the point is that reactive personalization, yes, is a very important part of the whole thing. But in this concept, it is just a part of the inbound personalization, just pampering the people who showed up at your site. Then what about the case where you know who you're dealing with? Now, when it comes to outbound personalization, we're talking about one-to-one marketing. Of course, you do know most of the things about that person, especially what they did with you, what they did in the past, what they bought, what they clicked, all that. Now, what if somebody's coming inbound and you also know who that person is? Maybe they logged on, maybe they bought something, they're putting something in the shopping basket. Now, at that point, you will know who they are. You know what that means is that as soon as you know who they are, you are free to use all kinds of data about that person. And when I say all kinds of data, it's not just limited to what they clicked in past 5 minutes. You're talking about demographic data, all the purchase history, all the response history, all kinds of other things. Now, the conundrum that you will encounter is that, well, there's too much data, and maybe it's not enough for you to respond fast enough because there's just too much data. So we're going to talk about how we're going to remedy that as well. Another concept. So what do you need? Well, we think that it starts with the data. You have to know something about the target so that you can carve up very interesting message to that person. But that means you have to know something about that person. That's the data part. But is that enough? Well, one question that I have about that is that do you even have the 360 customer view? What I mean by that is this. You may have all these clicks and responses and all the purchases and demographic and geodemographic, all the data out there, but are they even connected? I say this because as a database consultant, most of my clients don't have it. Sure, they may have a big data environment or a data lake environment. They may have all those things, but are they aligned around that person? One person at a time, really. So you got to do that first. Then you may find out that, oh my gosh, we have a lot of data points attached to each person. That means you need to do some analytics to really distill the information so that it becomes bite-sized. It could be the model score, it could be the segmentation, it could be whatever. But the point is, you cannot just use the raw data. And by the way, all this brute force customization engine may do that, but my experience tells me that even the machines understand refined data better and faster too. So that's the analytics part. Then what? Okay, so you know everything about everybody. Great. Well, there's something about everybody. Do you know how to align your content library into all this mix so that you can select the right creative for right moment for the right person? So that means you got to have the content library, you got to have an ample amount of creatives developed, and the most importantly, all those things should be linked on a personal level so that sure, you may know somebody's, I don't know, cutting edge, say, trendsetter in fashion industry or whatever. Then okay, so if you know that, then do you have enough pictures to show it to her? Is that lined up? Or you don't even have a content library. It's like it's somebody's drawer. It's just all messy stuff or somebody's like random C drive or whatever. Is that organized around what you're trying to do? Then of course, you have to have some technical capability to show different things to different people. So to me, these fourth elements, and of course, this is really high level stuff here, they have to work really nicely together. Otherwise, things don't happen. I've seen a lot of companies who are really good at analytics, who have a complete like state-of-the-art database about everybody, and yet the customization or the personalization doesn't happen in a nice way. Why is that? Because the creative people are not on board. They go like, oh, well, how many creatives do you need? Well, in this new world, and of course, we're talking about AIs creating real-time, personalization messages. You can do all those things, yes, but what doesn't change is that you still have to have a creative element. You have to have enough items to make up that final message. And you have to do all that based on data. So let's not forget that these are the elements that we need to achieve what we call holistic personalization. And depending on where you are, you may have to have a different planning, by the way. It may take a lot longer to set up customer 360 environment versus, I don't know, building a few personas. That could take some time too. Conversely, if you want to really procure some display capabilities, you may have to start shopping around right now. So this is a teamwork. This is not something that, I'll just leave up to some data geeks in a data department and hope to God that they're going to figure out something. No, it's not going to happen like that. Basically, this is the group effort where the CMO or even higher up should be aware of all these elements and make sure that things happen together in conjunction with each other. We're talking about basically a lot of teamwork here. So let's talk about the data first. So like I said, everything that we do should be based on data. The question is that, okay, sure, you may have some CDPs around the house, but is that adequate to do the level of personalization that we're talking about? One is, yeah, it should be omni-channel ready. It cannot be just some transaction data here and there. I mean, of course, all the CRM elements is very important, but it's not is not enough nowadays. Number two, it's got to be connected on an individual level. We're talking about personalization here. So it's not like some high level, top level report is enough at this point. You're talking about individual level information connected through customer 360 structure. Clean and reliable and up to date. You may think that that's a redundant statement, but you'll be shocked to see that how many databases are totally out of date and not categorized, not cleaned up, not standardized. It's just a mess. Case in point, if you look at your own offer code, so, what have I offered to all these people and how did they respond on a personal level? Well, do you have any offer code, what you offered in terms of product and what you actually offered, codified and standardized? I've seen cases where I've seen more than 1,000 different variations of your offers. When we went through the standardization work, well, you can categorize everything under 20 categories. Point is, yeah, sure, you could use the brute force machine learning to dissect all the similar word and all that. But you know what? Even machine takes up a lot of energy to dissect those things. And why not? Why not employ your employees to code these things at the time of campaign? Or categorizing all these things require a different kind of a machine. So maybe you should think differently. It's not like one targeting engine can do all those things anyway. And of course, that's what I mean by analytics ready, because most of the data sets are not categorized, not in line, and you gotta make it analytics ready so that it happens fast. And of course, that's synonymous to campaign ready as well. So the point is, a lot of data sets are based on where they're coming from. Yeah, we have a call center data, mobile data, email response data, web browse data. Of course, you have a CRM and a point of service data, purchase data, all kinds of data, right? What makes myself as a person is that I, as a consumer, touch all these channels. Sometimes I call in, sometimes I go to log on to the website, sometimes I buy online, sometimes I buy offline. I'm just a guy. And that is what I call single view of a customer, which is the same way of saying that, yeah, I want to have a full 360 view of that person. Same thing, but the point is, it is easy to draw this diagram, but the question is that, are you there already? So let's talk about that for a second, because this is a total prerequisite to get to the what we call holistic personalization. Now, when you talk about analytics, all this BI reporting, modeling, and scoring, all those things, and it's on a dark green shade on the right-hand side. We call that analytics. Now, why do we need analytics? Because when you have a sick amount of data coming through, you have to really distill the data to make some bite-sized answers so they can react to your customer's need fast, regardless of the channels. Now, what do modelers do? Even if you're hiring machine learning to all the modelings, and where does the energy go? About 80% of the analytics work goes into pre-processing. Because you know why? Most of the data sets are not analytics ready. Because this is one of those things you have to, as a company, invest heavily in. Otherwise, yeah, you may have a fancy name like CDP or data lake and all these other things. But the question that I ask is that, are they analytics ready? And how do you check it out? How long does it take for your team to come up with a model, a statistical model? I have seen cases where a company can build a model in one afternoon, or it could take 3 months up to the validation point. Now, the difference is not the modeling ability, because model could be built by machines these days anyway. It's not about that ability anymore. It's about the fact that, you know what, the data is such a mess, you can't even validate what you did. And that is a problem, isn't it? So if you look at on the left-hand side, I'm talking about data hygiene and consolidation, which is about assigning the ID and all the PII that you may or may not have. You're talking about email, name, address, all this other IDs they can connect a person into. Now, that's a commodity service. You can just hire somebody to do these things. And sometimes you may think that that's enough, but it's not. You still have to categorize things. And by the way, machine can categorize for you, or you can hire an intern to do it. But the point is that you still have to do it. And I gave you a small example of offer code, but imagine having like a few 100,000 SKUs or products. Sometimes, out of desperation, people use the labels that they use on a website, but that's not enough sometimes. You have to really clean that up. And you have to summarize them around the person. It's not about the transaction anymore, it's about that person. And you have to create these descriptors to describe that person. So it's not just that when that transaction happened. Let's flip that question. It's not about when that happened. It's about how long ago was the person's last transaction. Was it 6 months ago? Was it 2 months ago? Was it 3 years ago? It makes all the difference in the world when you want to deal with that person. It's not about the amount that he paid for the last transaction. What was his average value of a purchase for past 12 months, 24 months, 48 months, life to date? How much was a life to date spending? What if the person was a really good customer like 5 years ago and stopped coming completely? Then is he still a good customer? All those answers come out of this left-hand side process. Now, this is a processing view so that you don't have to be the data person to understand this really. It's more about the planning. If you're not doing this, this is what delays the whole project sometimes by a few years. So let's not forget to do it. That's the whole point that I'm trying to make here. And let's talk about the structural view of the CDP. When you talk about Customer 360, what does that mean? Let's talk about what kind of a data that you have to use. On the left-hand side, it's about customer behavior. They buy things, they browse things, they inquire about the products and whatnot. Okay, great. The king here is about the transaction because, yes, of course, the click is important, but the ultimate tendency of that person comes out from the transaction data. Did he actually pay for that service? On the right-hand side, it's about what you did to them. And in response, well, how did they react? What was their response? And by the way, it's a simplified chart, but you may engage a lot more channels in this. But simple example is that, yeah, you may have sent some direct marketing messages or catalog or whatever, or a lot of email campaigns, all the other marketing promotion channels like, social media and all that. Okay, so through the lens of this customer-centric platform, do you know if that person responded? Better yet, how many times did he respond? So if you summarize all that, if you look at the bottom side of this chart, you'll see that all this like descriptors of that buyer. Is the person over promoted, under promoted, or adequately promoted? And if I ask you, if you sent 20 emails to one person last month, is that a lot? The answer is you don't know, because you don't know how many times he responded. It's all relative, isn't it? So the point is, these things should be combined as the person at the core. That's the customer-centric view. And then start describing that person, not by some events, but clicks and all these last clicks and first click. You have to really summarize the whole thing, and you have to be able to answer. So how many times did he buy something in the past 12 months? Or how many times did he click? And it's about that person. It's really not about having the data. So a lot of CDP solutions, unfortunately, they only emphasize the top portion of this chart, but you really have to complete the triangle at the bottom and create the customer-centric view. Once you have that, all this model building and segmentation will be so much simpler, because everything about that person, it could be more than a few hundred variables per person. But the point is, it's all lined up around that person. And like I said, of course, the human analysts will work much faster that way. Even the machine builds model much faster and more reliably that way. So I just wanted to leave this as behind, because a lot of folks are investing heavily in CDP, and I don't. It breaks my heart when I see some CDPs where some customer ID is assigned and all the tables are linked, and a lot of vendors call that job completed. And what I'm trying to tell you is that it's not, and you have to be on top of them and create some analytics ready view to do the right things. So yeah, I poured out a lot of ideas here, and you may say that, oh, gee, that sounds all great, but we have to do something, we have to show some result in 2022. So what do we do now? Yes, I understand the dilemma, because going back to that four elements of the holistic personalization, you're talking about data analytics, content library, as well as the display technology. Where do we start? I say, because building customer 360 takes a long time and it requires some investment on your part, I'll say let's do the easy ones first. Something that you can procure. For example, you want to have the ability to show different things to different people. What I mean is that beyond just saying "Dear Stephen" and send out a boilerplate emails, you want to actually change the content for everybody. That means you need some kind of a help, outside help. You have to have a dynamic website if it's about the web, and if it's about email. Two examples, but you could expand it to nth degree. If it's an email, then you have to have some email engine that can support dynamic content. Now, how do we know what to show when it comes to different people? I'll say test this engine with a simple segmentation. And this does not have to be some fancy clustering work. It could be some rule-based segmentation. Let's say that you want to carve out some VIPs in your database and say, oh, I want to treat these guys differently. Conversely, you want to treat the newcomers differently. I'm going to send some welcome trees and whatnot. Let's try to automate those things, even if it's a very rudimentary segmentation. Let's see if your engine can show different things to different people using the segments that you just set up. And if you can do that, then you know that, oh wow, it could be a lot better if I do more advanced kind of a segmentation. You just at least know that this is going to work in the end. And number three, I'm going to talk about this in more detail, but segmentation is really not enough sometimes, because you're talking about thousands of or sometimes millions of people in one segment. You treat all of them the same way anyway. Yeah, it's better than having one segment, having 5 or 6 segments, or sometimes 30. But is this still like all you can do? The answer is no. You really have to dig deeper into what we call persona, and I'm going to explain this further. And that's how you convert what you don't know. And I talked about known explicit data. Yes, it's great for reactive personalization. But when it comes to holistic personalization, no, you have to convert unknowns to known. Because he or she may not have clicked something, but you know some other things about that person, and you build a model. And what is a persona? It's basically model score anyway. Build a model to convert the unknowns into knowns. Yeah, I don't know for sure, but I think he's about, I don't know, 80% chance that he's an early adopter. Now that is something. In other words, it's a probability, but it's better than nothing. I mean, we live like this forever anyway, because when you hear the weather report say, yeah, there's a 75 chance of snow shower tomorrow afternoon, then you know how to react to that. You know that it's not hard truth. You know that it could be off, but you are trained to think that way. And modeling is not that different, by the way. The model score is a probability. And by the way, weather report is based on models anyway. The point is, we all are, in a way, they're trained to think that way. And when you have a lot of these things lined up, then your communication with your customer base becomes richer and richer, because you're talking about each person differently, not just big segmentation driving the whole message. So when you are starting out something, I would go about it this way, but again, this too is not carved in stone because I don't know what your weak point is. Going back to your 4 pillars of your personalization, start with a weak point, but start somewhere is my message here. So I talked about segmentation here, but and then what's the difference basically? The difference is huge actually. Segments is a more of a messaging tool. It's really not designed to be a targeting tool. Yeah, you can do that. Yeah, let's select everybody in the segment and do something. If your database is small enough, that may be enough. But most of the times it's not. So when you write copies, you cannot write unlimited number of copies. I mean, of course, again, we're talking about machines creating messages, but even that is not unlimited. You have to have some seed messages that you have to build anyway. So how do we go about it? It's great to have the segments to have a message here and there, but when it comes to real targeting, you need some personas. And because personas are about attributes. It's about your questions. You're selling something. Maybe you're selling high-end electronics. You want to know who are the early adopters versus trend followers. Who are the bargain seekers? Who are into this type of product versus that kind of product? Now, if you know that, then you can even use that not just in an outbound personalization, where I'm going to talk to everybody who looks like an early adopter. What if the person is coming to you? If you identify that person and say, oh, wow, that person is a very high likely to be an early adopter, then don't usher him to the generic site or page. Show him something that is new. And you can totally differentiate how you deal with it, how you engage with this person in more colorful way. Not limited to some number of segments that you may have. Another thing about segmentation is it's really hard to update, by the way, especially when you build some clustering work or any kind of a stat-based clustering. If you run it again with a changing environment, you may never get the same cluster twice. And what about all the messaging framework that you build with the old segmentation, where you have to do the whole thing again? And also, don't forget that the whole clustering is about group people first and then describe them later based on dominant characteristics. So why not go after the actual characteristics of a person and find the dominant characteristics of that person using a lot of personas attached to them. So I'm going to illustrate that difference with a chart. So in this example, I only show 4 people here, but you may have 1,000,000 people in your database. So imagine A through million. And then the segments, the personas could be, I have 4 examples here, but again, I've seen hundreds of personas in one company. Some companies have like 140 personas just in the home improvement category. And can you imagine how colorful their messaging could be if you know all these things? But in this small example, let me explain how this thing works. So we have 4 personas, basically 4 models, 4 affinity models. Frequent traveler, right? Early adopter, family-oriented, bargain seeker. Now, just like anything, nobody is just one or the other, really. Sometimes, look at person number C here. This person is a frequent traveler and also early adopter, but far from family-oriented. Maybe he's a single guy. Person D was or is a frequent traveler, and she is completely family-oriented. What I'm trying to say is that when you have one chance to say something to a person, what are you going to say first? Something that is convenient for you to push, that, yeah, this month we're pushing this product, so I'm going to just say this no matter what. Well, that's not personalization. Again, you're supposed to say something that the other person is interested in. So how do we figure out what are the dominant affinity or characteristics of that person? If I'm encountering person number 1, A, I'll talk to that lady about the traveling related product first. If I'm inquiring person number D, I'm talking about children, I'm talking about family, vacation, or something family oriented. Now, why is this so powerful? 1, this thing can be used, something like this, can be used for outbound personalization. If you remember the first framework, you have to differentiate outbound and inbound personalization. You can use this kind of personas for both. Again, it's not about channel, division, or product or brand. It's about the person. It's not about the channel for sure. The person does not change just because she's engaging with you in a different channel. So you can carry these things. So as long as you can identify who that person is, you can carry this all over the place. And then if it's an outbound, of course you can select based on this kind of a high score. It's nothing but a model scores. Yeah, sure. You want to talk to all the early adopters, you could do that too. What if you decided that you're talking to somebody anyway, and then you want to change the messaging? Because again, yeah, sure, you know that somebody's a football fan, but you know that person could be bored by this thing. You want to switch and change the messaging around. Now, in that case, do you know the second highest score for that person is? Let's talk about that. So you never run out of things to talk about, basically, this way. That's outbound. When it's inbound, it could be the store, it could be online. We can figure out, even the machine will figure out the dominant characteristics really fast because the machine can compare numbers really fast and say, okay, when this person shows up, this is what we're going to talk about. So how do we marry this thing to the whole creative elements? Well, there are unlimited number of people, but you may have a persona menu that is limited, and you can line up your personas and your content library side by side and decide, okay, this type of person, when she shows up, this is what we're going to show. You can decide that in the beginning, when you have only a few hundred personas, you could do it that way. And by the way, when you have nothing, I'll say you start with like 5 personas and see how it goes, just as a practice run. But point is, this thing is very versatile, and you can use it for both outbound and inbound, and for all channels that you may be engaged. So let me give you the persona menu, because when you set up persona menu, by the way, you have to be a little bit selfish. And yes, I'm talking about customer-centric marketing, but hey, this is all business. So depending on what you're trying to sell, the persona menu changes as well. Let's just imagine, wow, it would be so nice to know about that kind of affinity to sell what I'm selling. So let's pick an example here. Yeah, hospitality, the travel industry. Wouldn't it be nice to know who's a frequent flyer, or who's a frequent business traveler, or foreign traveler, luxury traveler, gourmet wine enthusiast? Say, yeah, sure, you're selling the same cruise ship ticket all the time, but between the cruise ship booking, and this is a real life practice actually, between the booking and the actual cruise date, well, you have a lot of communication going back and forth here. But if you know that somebody is not interested in some adventure seeking stuff, and maybe she will just rather relax and have a, I don't know, wine tasting stuff or some shopping expedition and whatnot, wouldn't it be nice to know that beforehand? And by the way, if the data on your side is limited, we can do all this with the third party data as well. The point is, when you set up the wish list, it's about what you want, and then finding out, okay, we just need a sample of people who have done something like this before and build a model. And here's another benefit: you can score the entire prospect or customer base with the model scores. Now, that's another benefit of these models, and here's why. I said in the beginning that known explicit data, they're great, but they're limited. You cannot know everything about everybody. But when something is converted into model score, you can score everybody in your database. And everybody will be lined up in terms of high to the low score. So, wine enthusiast. Sure, I may score about 7 in wine enthusiast score. I may, I don't know, score about 8 out of 9 in foreign traveling or whatever. The point is, and now that I'm an empty nester, my family vacation score could be really low. The point is, I may not have said all these things myself, but when you have a model, you will have a probability of somebody being something. Let me show you some other kind of examples so that you can have your imagination fly. So what if you're in the telecommunication industry, like cable or satellite or telephone, all that? So cell phone service. Wouldn't it be nice before you start pushing all this high-speed internet, for example? Wouldn't it be nice if you know that, wow, he's doing this because he has a home office, or he has a big family, or maybe they're downloading or streaming movies a lot, or maybe there's a professional gamer in the household, or this is a young family, so that this family is just mobile phone only and heavily rely on internet and whatnot, and maybe she or he will never subscribe to some cable channel. Wouldn't that be nice to know that before you approach them? Because all my past conversation with the telecom companies that, yeah, we're the only guys in your neighborhood, so you're going to buy this anyway. So you know what I'm going to push? The highest, the fastest internet I could imagine. But it is so much nicer and more personable if you can identify my need. And of course, here's another built-in benefit of all this. Even the users of the information know that this is not some hard truth. This is about probability. So that leads to gentle nudging. I don't know for sure, but you may need some high speed internet more than others because you have a big family, because you have a home office, because there's a big gamer. It seems like, I don't know, whatever it is. The reason why they buy these things may differ, and you can identify those things that they make them tick and address it in a very nice, gentle way. Now it goes on. I mean, you're talking about retail. You can talk about all kinds of other things. So the persona menu is one of those things you could imagine as, okay, I'm pushing this. So wouldn't it be nice to know these things type of thing? And of course, once you build a model, you can expand this menu nth degree. I've seen cases, like I said, just in a home improvement category, you could have 140. So can you imagine if you expand it? And by the way, too much is bad because you cannot even remember what you built. But the point is, there's no technical limit in terms of how many you can build for your businesses. So to summarize, personas are built for one specific attribute at a time. So therefore, it converts unknowns to known, leading to nudges, not hard sells. That's one thing that I talked about already. And then no missing value. Yeah, you could score anybody with a model score. So you don't have to wait for some known explicit data about that person. Number three, yes, nobody's one dimensional. So what that means is that, yeah, sure. So he has high scores in multiple categories. But what is the dominant characteristics? When I have one chance to engage this person, what am I supposed to talk about first? And when I run out of that, maybe he's losing interest in that category. What is the second one and third one? And so you can rotate your messaging to that person. So yeah, I talked about rotation and all. So basically, there are a lot of benefits of using personas, even in the age of machines and in the age of a big data, because the big data is big because one, we don't throw away anything. And number two, they are not organized very well. So therefore, these things are very helpful to have, even when you engage primarily with the machines. I'll just leave this behind. This is the last page that I have now. Is the one of my mentors in my startup days was Lester Wunderman, who's the father of direct marketing. In the when he was 80 something already, this is 1999, he saw that the whole proliferation of the internet online services will only benefit the companies, not so much the consumers. So what he was worried about was that he was not worried about the technology or lack of data at the time already. Also, we're still struggling with the technology and data even nowadays. What now he's saying is that, you know what, let's think in terms of how they see the relationship. You don't own the person's data just because you have some engagement with that person. Don't act like you know me. In other words, treat me with a respect and save my time. And to me, that is something they must remember, because just because you can, you should not be doing all those things. So it is one of those things that I want to leave behind. You don't have to go through this right now. I'm going to leave this behind anyway. But I just wanted to insert this page. So the key takeaway, I pretty much summarized everything that I just talked about. But I wrote all this down. I have a whole series that I'm writing on Ad Week in the past on a Target Marketing magazine. And all those things can be found on the Adweek site as well as on my website. But to summarize, this is a long journey. You have to get the data aligned. It's not about channels. So you have to put all the data together around a person. And segmentation is good enough starting point, but let's not think that that's the end point. Let's get deeper with the personas and other types of models. And of course, number 8, I didn't talk about it during the thing, but again, what is a direct marketing and what is a one-to-one marketing? You gotta measure the level of success that you enjoyed by doing all these things. And it may not have worked, and you have to improve those things. It's not a one-time deal here. You gotta keep doing it. So that means you have to close a loop of each campaign properly so that you could improve what you did just now. And so next time you do, you gotta do better. So let's not forget that closing the loop is also in the